Again, we are here in the Amida Sutra talking about Anathapindika. Anathapindika was a very prominent figure in early Buddhism. So what we left off last time was to talk about how he became the disciple of the Buddha, and then how a little bit about his background, that he was a wealthy patron. If you remember, just a quick review here. So there was a spirit that dwelt in his house, and he appeared to Anathapindika and told him to stop giving his wealth away, or else he would deplete all his wealth. But Anathapindika did not take that into consideration, and he just wanted to give to the three jewels: the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And so Anathapindika told the spirit to leave the house. The spirit was homeless, and he went to the gods of the city, and then upper and higher, where they could not resolve a problem. So he took his matter to Sakara, the god of gods. And the god of God has a solution for him, and that was to recover Anathapindika's wealth. So he had to retrieve all the treasures lost in the floods, and to procure unclaimed buried treasures, and then to persuade Anathapindika's debtors to repay their debts. And so that's what we left off. So from here we could see that gods and spirits do have an influence on us, and because the spirits could influence the debtors to repay their debts, even though they may not have wanted to. But the gods and the spirits are still mundane beings. They have not reached enlightenment. So their understanding of conditionality is not deep enough. So the spirit was telling Anathapindika to stop giving, but the cost for wealth is generosity. So the spirit did not have a deep enough understanding of conditionality. So they could be wrong. Right? So the spirits, the gods could be wrong. So we should study the Dharma, put into practice, and have resolve for our goal of enlightenment, and to avoid negative influence. So that's essentially that's what we can learn from this part of the story. And so to continue on, Anathapindika was able to recover his treasure, so he was no longer a destitute. And the spirit appeared before the enlightened one, the Buddha, and asked for forgiveness because he was wrong in his advice to Anathapindika. And the Buddha taught him that a person who strove for perfection in giving could not be kept from it by anything in the world, by neither bad nor holy spirits, nor gods, nor devils, nor threat of death. So again, gods, they do have influence, but they are still mundane beings. So after Anathapindika had become as wealthy as before, there was a Brahmin who was greedy and jealous of Anathapindika. And he wanted to here it says he wanted to abduct the manifestation of Suri, the goddess of fortune. So Suri is still believed in India is a Hindu goddess, a goddess of wealth. So those who want wealth will worship Suri to have wealth. So Suri in Hinduism is a very popular goddess. So this Brahmin was jealous of it, and so he wanted to abduct this spirit of wealth so that he could obtain wealth himself. So he realized that then he came to Anathapindika, and he realized that he could force the spirit to do his bidding, to gain wealth for him. So he went to Anathapindika's house, and he realized that that there was this goddess was living in a white rooster. So he had clairvoyant powers. He had supernatural power, Tang Tong. So he had this ability to see things that people normally cannot see. But then the spirit moved away from the rooster when he realized that the Brahmin was, well, she realized that the Brahmin was after her, and now the goddess wandered into a Jew, and the Brahmin asked for the Jew as well. Say, can I have that Jew? Because if he could own that Jew, then he could own this goddess of wealth, and he would be very wealthy. But the spirit jumped and moved to and hid it in a staff. A staff is what monks in the past used when they would go around for begging for food. So it's very impolite to be knock on people, hey, can I have some food? But they would stand silently at the door, and then they would, ring the staff. They would pound it a few times, and then the rings on the staff would make sounds, and people inside the house would know, oh, there's somebody waiting for alms giving. And they would go out and give up some food. And then the spirit then hit on the head of the wife of Anita Pandika. And he said to himself, well, this is not good. I cannot ask for his wife. That is very impolite. He cannot go and ask for somebody's wife. So he confessed his evil intentions and returned the presents, and deeply ashamed, and then he left the house. So the Jews, the rooster, all those things he gave back to Anita Pandika. Anita Pandika then went to the Buddha and told him about this strange encounter with this Brahmin. And the Buddha explained to him how the world is changed through good works, and how for those with right insight, through moral purification, everything is attainable, even nibbana or nirvana. So it's using trickery, using supernatural power to gain wealth is not a reliable way, and it will surely lead him or her to misfortune. So the best thing is through good work, through right insight, and through moral purification. Then you can attain anything. So this is significant here, and we're going to spend the remainder of the time talking about this, because it has everything to do with us. This is what we call right livelihood, chánh mạng, 正命. Right livelihood can lead to nirvana. Right livelihood is part of the Eightfold Path. So therefore, it is very significant. That's why we want to spend a few minutes to talk about this. Economic transformation through livelihood that is suitable for the spiritual life. And that's what we want, is not only about spiritual practice, but how to live a life according to spiritual practice. We have this life, and we have to lead it. It's not, right? You cannot ignore this life. So we must now look at the transformation of economic aspect of society and how it impacts our lives, worldly and spiritual. In the first place, we must recognize that the kind of work that we do, our professions, our career, and the conditions under which we do it have a strong effect on us. So you imagine this. We spend the greater part of our waking life working or doing something. And so it has a very deep impact on our whole being. So we may not always realize this, but think about it. You spend on your job 8, 7, or 9, or even 12 hours a day, and you do it for 5 days out of a week, and then 50 weeks out of the year, 1 week vacation, but majority of the time you're working, and you do this for 20, 30, or even 40 years. So you can see that how it can leave a mark on you. It can definitely change who you are. right? So you do this over and over again. So a person whose job is um, very stressful, for example, it can take a toll on you. You can age very fast. But a person who is very fortunate and has found a job that is meaningful in helping others, for example, and very looking forward to it, you can see how joyful it is and how it could be very levitating, right? It can make a person feel very meaningful, and therefore that person's life can be very uplifting. So you can see that by doing things over and over again, we can change our consciousness. So it has a very deep impact on who we are. And that's why right livelihood has everything to do with us. That's why I have chosen to talk about this, because it relates to us in every aspect of our lives. And we may not always recognize it, but it has a deep impact. Every little thing that we do, day in, day out, it will leave a mark on you. It will transform you into somebody else, right? So it is of crucial importance that we develop, that if we wish to develop spiritually, that we have this right livelihood. First consideration is that part of that right livelihood is that one should be ethical, right? And do the work ethically, and that one should not feel guilty or ashamed about the work. So that's the first thing. So we should choose a career that is ethical and that makes us feel, at least not feel guilty or ashamed of it, right? The second is that it should not involve one in no violence to other living creatures, like butchering, killing. So if you imagine a butcher, he spends 8 hours a day cutting pigs' throats, hearing the screaming. It could leave you, it could really impact you. And some butchers, they don't last long. They may, in the jobs, I read somewhere there, they last about 3 to 5 years, and they could not take that anymore. So it could really impact them psychologically. And it should not exploit others, playing on their weaknesses and negative states of mind, right? So the job should not put pressure, should not play on others' weaknesses and exploit them. And that it should not lead one to act dishonestly in a job where you have to be clever and cheat and lie in order to meet your numbers. Eventually that cheating and lying becomes natural and becomes part of you, and it's very difficult to change. So our practice gives us, when we practice Buddhism properly, it gives us the courage to do work and behave ethically, even if those around us may choose otherwise. So our work and our practice, they reinforce each other. Our work reinforces and gives substance to our practice, to our Buddhist practice, all we learned. And that we find that when we apply it properly, that we know that it works. And our understanding of the Dharma can help us to resolve worldly problems at work, problems at home, personally, interpersonally, right? Problems that we ourselves have inside, but problems that when we deal with other people, that we know how to communicate and how to overcome. So when we practice, we learn something. We need to test it to whether it works or not. And that environment is work. That environment is called family. So our family, our work environment are important to our practice. And our practice is important to help us how to handle other people, how to deal with other people. So work that provides public services is a good way to cultivate merits. 修福, right? 杜福, such like public accounting, right? Public works. Those works are very beneficial because every day going to work is every day cultivating merits. 杜福. So every day you go to work, you help people, you are cultivating merits. But if the line of work doesn't offer such opportunities to cultivate merits, then the practitioner will have to spend additional time and resources outside of work to cultivate merits. Does it make sense? If your line of work doesn't offer that, then you have to do it on the outside in order to cultivate merits. And cultivating merits is very fundamental if we want to be successful in studying Buddhism. The Dhammapada Sutra says, through generosity that one can attain enlightenment. So in this case, here's an excerpt from a story from Dhammapada. Protected mind leads to happiness. One time when the Buddha was at Savatthi, a big city back in India during that time, there was a banker's son who was approached by an elder or monk during alms round for food. He said to the elder, "Venerable, I desire to obtain release from suffering. Tell me some way by which I can obtain release from suffering." The elder replied, "Well, good for you that you are looking for that. So what you can do to release from suffering, give alms food. Give foods to those in need. Give lodging, a place to stay, from shelter from the rain and from the elements, and give bows and ropes and other requisites. And then divide your possessions into three parts. With one portion, carry on your business. With another portion, support son and wife or family, and dispense the third portion in alms in the religions of the Buddha." So this is very practical. We take our income and we can divide into three parts. One is to carry on your business. There are people who are not business owners, but they have a career. So this is, in a way, to help you to be more proficient in your career, at your jobs, training, things like that. So things that you need to develop yourself professionally. And then the other portion is to support family, right? So family expenses. You need to have enough income to cover your family expenses or emergency funds. So here we can say support son and family as family expenses and emergency fund. You need to have enough money for emergency funds or any incidental expenses like let's say you're invited to a wedding where you have to buy gifts, right? So you have additional money to accommodate such unexpected visits or unexpected expenses. So that's part of your emergency fund. And then the third portion is to donate. So you can divide this into really 5 portions. Develop your career or your business, family, savings, expenses, and the emergencies of savings, and donations, and to develop your career. Right? So it's very practical. So we should take our income and divide into 5 portions to help us, to help others and to help ourselves. So after the banker's son did all that, he came back to the elder and said, "Okay, I've done all that. So what else can I do now to be released from suffering?" He said, "Well, now that you've done all that, you can take upon yourself the 3 refuges, right? Refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And then the 5 precepts. So these are 2 basic conditions to become a Buddhist. You take the 3 refuges, and then you observe the 5 precepts. The 5 precepts are: do not take life, do not take what is not given, and do not misbehave sexually, do not tell lies, and do not take mind-damaging substances. So those are the 5 precepts that one will need to observe if one is to be a Buddhist. So he did all that, and he came back to the elder and said, okay, what else? I've done all that. He said, well, next you can observe 10 precepts. So 10 precepts are the first 5, which are no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and then no lying. You can break that into 4 more elements. No harsh words to cause emotional pain in others. No double-tongued speech where you can cause disharmonies, between parties. No frivolous speech, which usually encourages harassment and misbehavior in others, and no lying, right? And then the last 3, no greed, no anger, and no delusion. So those compose the 10 precepts. And then after that, then he said, okay, I've done all that too. What's next? He said, well, become a monk. To become a monk here, we should understand that is to seek for spiritual liberation. This is where spiritual liberation starts to take place. Because when you take the 3 refuges, quy Phật, quy Pháp, quy Tăng, quy Phổ, quy Phật, quy Sân. When you take the 3 refuges, you are defining a pathway for yourself. There are people who do good deeds, but they are not well grounded, because if they do good deeds and favorable conditions occur to them, then they become generous. But if they are they have a lot of karmic rewards, phước báo. If they have a lot of merits, but evil conditions come to them, then they become very mean and very oppressive. Does it make sense? Because they have ability. But when we take refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, we have a clear path to never act unskillfully. That is the value of taking refuge in the 3 Jews. Does it make sense? Right? And the 5 precepts will prevent us from ever sliding down below the human realm. Because in the animal realms, the hungry ghosts, the hell realm, there's a lot of suffering that you don't have control of yourself. And therefore, when we take the 5 precepts, we are preventing ourselves from sliding down to the suffering realm, or the realms where we have no control. In the human realm, at least we have pain and pleasure mixed together, and it helps us to remind ourselves when we encounter pain. It helps to remind ourselves to be right back on track, and pleasure helps us to be motivated to continue. So the human realm is really perfect. It's excellent for cultivation. And the same thing with the 10 precepts will allow you, it elevates your consciousness where you are resonating with the heaven beings. So you like to be around those who are very heavenly. So it goes as far as the heavens. But to be liberated from the cycle of life and death, we have to transcend beyond the human realm, beyond the heavenly realms, and to nirvana. And that's what it is to become a monk, is to seek to have resolve, determination for nirvana, to be liberated from the cycle of life and death forever. So here we can see this story here. What we can learn from this is that before one seeks nirvana, spiritual liberation, one needs to have a strong foundation. And that foundation comes from merit cultivation, from giving. Does it make sense? Right. And from here, we can also see it from another perspective, that financial security is very important for spiritual cultivations and spiritual liberation. One can try to gain wealth through unethical means, but there won't be security in it. For example, if one resorts to an ethical procurement to get something unethically, that means that one has already conditioned oneself psychologically that one does not have enough, right? If somebody is saying, I need to get this, I will have to steal this to get it, that means that person does not have enough to go and steal. Does it make sense? So if that person has already conditioned himself that he doesn't have enough, then there is dissatisfaction, there is already suffering in him. And if he can obtain what he has stolen, then there is fear in losing it. You know what I'm saying? So that is why there is no security if it is gained unethically. Because you're saying you don't have enough, and when you have it, you're gonna be afraid of losing it. So that's why there is no security in an ethical procurement of things. Or one can choose to go by the law of cause and effect to obtain financial security through generosity, through giving, and through elimination of selfishness. So when we give generously, we are psychologically conditioning ourselves that we have more than enough, more than what we need, which gives us a sense of security. Right? When you can give, you give happily, you give generously, that means you have more than you need, right? Therefore, you are telling yourself, without telling yourself, you are really planting a seed in your mind that you have more than enough. That's why you can give happily, you can give generously. So in other words, by giving generously, we are making ourselves feel secure. Saving money, so we should, therefore we should save money where we can and give a portion of it to those in need, like we just talked about, and enjoy a simple life, right? Avoid wastefulness and indulgence. So saving money can provide one with a financial buffer, but without past merit cultivation, any savings will be lost or depleted. For example, like in a natural disaster, where a person one's possessions can be wiped out, such as a fire or a flood, or robbery. Thieves will take all of his possessions, all of his savings. Right? He has worked years accumulating wealth, but then a robber comes and steals it all. Or confiscations from authority, like the government comes and takes it all away. Or children or relatives acting as karmic debt collectors, 冤家债主, right? 冤家债主. They plead all of his money through slavish spending. Right? There are families whose sons and daughters, they don't care about the wealth of the family. They just spend and spend like as if they deserve that kind of money to spend, and they don't care about their family. And they spend, and they completely depleted all the wealth in the family. I've heard many stories of such. I'm sure you have too. So that's an example where a person has gained wealth, but there is no foundation, no merit cultivation to sustain it. Or that he needs to spend all of his savings to cover misfortunes, such as medical expenses. So when he had no money, he had no health issues. But as soon as he had some money saved up, then he encountered some illness, making him to spend his savings to cure his illness. So it's very strange. I've heard of people like that. They're fine when they are complaining they have no money, but as soon as they save up some money, they have some sort of sickness that makes them to spend money. So they can never have that savings for long. So in our society, people can go broke due to their medical expenses. So good health is a blessing, right? You don't have to spend much when you are in good health when you have good health. So cultivating merits and eliminating selfish craving can help to protect one's wealth. So not only about giving or enjoying, but we need to make sure that that enjoyment is substantiated, that something supports it. And that support is generosity, giving, eliminating selfishness. When one feels financially secure, one can then think about taking refuges in the three Jews, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, and observing the five precepts. Because if a person who doesn't have enough, it's very difficult to practice giving and to be thinking about spiritual things. Right? Only when you are financially secure, where you don't have to worry about money, then you can think about something of higher value. Trying to make ends meet will not make it easy for spiritual cultivation because one cannot focus one's mind. I remember reading an interview about his philanthropy and his work to help the poor. The famous Bill Gates, he said, and I always remember, he says to an interviewer, "Do you know what it's like being extremely poor?" He said, extremely poor people think about their next meal all the times. Right? Where is my meal going to come from? Is my family going to starve tonight? That is always on their minds when for extremely poor people. That's all they think about, he said. So if our mind is preoccupied with worries of going hungry, then there is no energy left to think about spiritual liberation. So financial security is important, and it's reality. But we should understand that absolute security in a materialistic world does not exist. There's no such thing as absolute security. And that's why one has to take refuge in the three Jews. Right? So just giving alms alone is not enough to give you that security. And that's why the elder is encouraging the banker's son to take refuges in the three Jews and to observe the five precepts. In other words, you cannot just go out and give money and expect to feel secure. There's got to be something. Like when we talked about last time, we drew a graph, right? So this is happiness. This is money. So there is linear correlation, 1 for 1. Every dollar you have equals 1 point of happiness. But at some point, it will saturate. More money will not give you more happiness. But we need to continue. We want to be happier. You have to continue. And this is spirituality. And that spirituality is taking refuges in the three Jews and observing the five precepts. So if we want security, we need to do more than just giving money, donating money. Right? We have to observe the five precepts and take refuges in the three Jews. And the reason is because when we're up here, we have security. It's because we have transcended our fear and our greed. There's no fear because there's no greed. There's no fear of losing. There's no greed that you don't have something. Does that make sense? Therefore, there is security. There is insecurity because of fear and greed. But as long as you have transcended fear and greed, you have security. So that's why if one is serious about spiritual cultivation, one should also be serious about generosity, about giving, about helping others. So they go hand in hand. So the security gives us the confidence to do what is meaningful and meritorious without feeling pressure to do things that we don't want to do. And the most meaningful thing to do is to help others, to help ourselves, to help others, so that we all can achieve security and enlightenment, right? That's, according to Buddhism, that is the most meaningful thing to do. But if one is financially insecure, then one won't be courageous enough to give. So if you're stuck in this vicious cycle, you don't give, you have no merit, therefore you have fear of not having enough, therefore you cannot give. So you're stuck in this cycle. So when we are in a situation where we can give without worries, we should continue that, because if we lose that momentum and we get stuck in this vicious cycle, it will be very difficult to get out of it. If we can meditate and focus our minds on spiritual liberation, then we are truly blessed, because we're not stuck in that vicious cycle. Right? We can avoid ever entering that vicious cycle. Does it make sense? So if our job can help us to cultivate merits, then that is right livelihood. In the Eightfold Path, 八正道, 八真道, right livelihood plus right view, right contemplation, right speech, right karma. So chánh mạng, right? Chánh kiến cộng chánh kiến, chánh tư duy, chánh ngữ và chánh nghiệp. So 正命plus 正见, 正思维, 正语, and 正业 forms the foundation of spiritual cultivation. So right livelihood is a career that helps us to cultivate merits, will form the foundation of spiritual cultivation. Without a strong foundation, jumping right into right diligence, right mindfulness and right meditation, chánh tinh tấn, chánh niệm và chánh định,正精进, 正念, 正定, jumping right into the more spiritual practice, there is no guarantee of success. So the fundamental success is that at least we have a happy life, right? Anything more than that is spiritual liberation. Just to bring to a point here, in the United States, I think this is last year, Americans spent 1.28, almost $2 billion in apps and gadgets about meditation, yoga. So meditation has become more mainstreamed in America, right? Everywhere you go, you talk about meditation, people will accept it. So it has become mainstream. They estimated that 36 million US adults now meditate, maybe from 5 minutes to 10 minutes, or even longer. And this has increased almost 10% from 2012 to now. So about 10 years, it has grown by 10%. So the meditation market size is more than $2 billion. And they project that this is going to reach to $2.5 billion by 2025. So people are spending a lot of resources, money, in meditation practice. There are about almost 1,000 meditation centers in the U.S. There are about 6,500 yoga studios to practice meditation, generating $350 million in revenues. And there are tons of apps to help you to meditate. Even like an Apple Watch can give you a breathing session. So there are those apps to help you to practice meditation. And that generates about $440 million per year. And meditation consumer demographics include average meditator spends about almost $300 to $400, $300 to $500 a year on meditation classes and books. Typical user spends $500 to $1,000, and there are about 36 million meditators. So you can see that a lot of people are spending money on meditation resources, apps and books and classes. But if you look at the survey of how stressful people are, there are a lot of people who are very stressful in today's environment, even though they spend a lot of money in meditation, but there's still a lot of stress. So what do you think is the number one cause of stress in the United States? What do you think? What's the reason that people feel stressed out? Any idea? Barbara, any idea? You're right on. Money. Money is the number one reason why people stressed out. Financial problems. Money is the top cause of stress in the United States. You're right on. 72% of Americans stressed about money, at least during the previous month when they did the surveys, one time a month. At least some of the time during the previous month. And 77% feeling considerable anxiety about finances. So it is a real problem. Maybe they stop spending too much money on those apps. They'll be able to save some money. But they are spending a lot of money for whatever reasons, and finances are a major issue. Americans now spend 8% more time at work compared to 20 years ago. 13% of people work a second job to cover their expenses, and at least 40% report that their jobs are stressful. Right? They have to work more to cover for what they need. Signs of work-related stress include anxiety, depressions, difficult to concentrate, fatigue, headache, mood swings, muscle tensions, pain, stomach problems. So stress can lead to a lot of physical illnesses. It also impacts personal relationships. People in all of our lives that cause us stress. You would think family would give you happiness, but in many cases, no, they cause you more stress. And but I'll leave it like that. The signs of stress related to personal relationships are similar to normal symptoms of general stress. So that may include physical health and sleep problems, depressions, and anxiety. Also, the social media platform can be very damaging to our being. When we use social media, it impacts the way that we think. We think particularly about ourselves because we constantly compare ourselves with others. And when we compare ourselves with others, we feel inadequate. If you look at all those social media postings, they all post happy times, happy companies, right? Nobody posts anything negative about themselves. So when you look at that, it may not be very helpful because you feel like, especially if you're feeling down and you look at those posts, it may make you feel even worse, right? So anyways, and then also one last thing here is about parenting, where there's a lot of demand in parenting, and it can create a lot of stress, especially parents with children who have learning disabilities or maintaining attention. It can be very stressful. In our daily lives as well, stress of being too busy is getting more and more common. These days, everybody seems to be busier and busier more than ever. Anyways, now the point here is that if we want to practice meditation without a strong foundation, it will not be helpful. So the strong foundation here includes right contemplation, right view, have the right understanding conditionality, understanding the Buddhist principle properly, and right contemplation, where we think about positivity, right? So right view is to avoid extremes of nihilism or existentialism, thường kiến và đoạn kiến,长见and 短见. And to understand the law of conditionality, that's right view. And right contemplation, 正思维, chánh tư duy, that includes feelings and should be skillful and positive. And then right speech, 正语, 真语, is speech that preserves harmony and generates merits. And then right karma, 真nghiệp, 正业, is inclusive of skillful thought, speech, and action. And then lastly, right livelihood, 正命, 真忙, having a meaningful career that helps self and others. What we do day in and day out will leave a mark on our consciousness. And that mark is preparation for success in meditation practice. So we just don't jump right into meditation practice, but we should lay a foundation. I mean, we can do it at the same time, but what I'm trying to get at is that we need to have a strong foundation if we want to be successful in Buddhist practice. And that strong foundation is generosity, is giving, and eliminating selfish craving. So going back to what the Buddha said here before we end, is that right, the world is changed through good works, through right insight, and through moral purification. Then everything is attainable, even nirvana. So let alone worldly happiness. If you can achieve nirvana, then worldly happiness should be a piece of cake, right? If we apply Buddhism properly, then a happy life should be a piece of cake. Okay, let's summarize what we talked about. These are the major takeaways from today's talk. If you remember anything, this is what I would like you to remember. Financial security is fundamental to for for spiritual cultivation, and that's reality we cannot accept. We cannot ignore it. Wealth comes from generous giving and eliminating selfishness. So according to the Dhammapada, what we just looked at, the Dhammapada Sutra, the protected mind leads to happiness. So protecting ourselves from unskillfulness and negativity, from greed, anger, jealousy, and those negative emotions. Spiritual cultivation needs to have a strong foundation and substance. So when we apply Buddhism, it helps us to have substance when we apply it at work. So we not only learn it, but we apply it. And when we apply it, it gives us aspiration. It gives us motivation to learn more about Buddhism. So the two go together. Practice and learning, they reinforce each other. And the foundation for right livelihood. So right livelihood is really is a foundation for spiritual cultivation. The foundation for right livelihood includes right view, right contemplation, right speech, right karma. Right? So it's about when you act ethically, it helps you to cultivate merits. And when you have merits, you have a strong foundation to allow you to practice meditation. So if one works honestly, conscientiously at their job, they can make it a form of right livelihood, even if not of perfect livelihood, right? So live a simple life, enjoy more of nature. It's free, right? Good for your consciousness and good for your pocket as well, because it doesn't cost you as much to enjoy nature. At least much less expensive than the mindless entertainment that will only leave you empty. spiritually and financially. Right? So again, before we dive deep into meditation practice, we should have a strong foundation. And that meditation practice will help to energize us, to give us this buffer so that we not only have the energy to take on what is already on our plate, but it helps us to be creative, to stay ahead of the competition. The world is very competitive. Everybody seems to be doing more than what is on their plate, right? People have to work more hours at the job to get things done and to stay ahead, or they have to work a second job in order to stay ahead financially. So there are a lot of demands. The world demands a lot from us. Without practicing meditation, we will not have the positivity, the energy to take on the stress. And that's the value of meditation practice, is that it allows you to take on more and more without killing yourself. Does that make sense? And so when we practice Buddhism, especially when you practice meditation, we are cultivating positivity, and that gives us energy, spirituality, so that we can do more to help ourselves and to help others.